What's up guys, in this video we're going to make a Python Hangman game, starting with just the minimum we need to get it running, and then we'll talk about some extra features that might be nice. So when I'm talking about the minimum, I need a word from a word bank. We need to get a valid guess from the user, so if they type 2 letters or a number or something, we're going to say no, it has to be 1 letter. And then we either reveal the letter in the blanked out version that they see, or we keep score and say, okay, you're 1 step closer to losing. So let's do that. So let's make a word bank, and let's go with a couple Pokemon. Let's go Bulbasaur. Which one is second? Was Charmander or Squirtle next? I don't remember. And this could be as long as you want. If they're bigger, you could stretch them out with 1 per line, which is really readable, but I'm going to keep it really short. In this first version, I'm going to make them all single words with no spaces, no dashes, or anything like that, but we'll talk about handling those later. So how do we pull a word? We're going to go import random, and then we're going to go solution equals random.choice from the words. I made the words all caps because it's a constant. When I say all caps, I mean the name of the variable. Inside of here, we could do whatever we want because we can just have the code uppercase them. When we pull it out, we could go dot upper if we wanted to, right? But now let's test this real quick and see, does it get a word from the word bank? Hey, that's a start. Now we're not going to print that. We're going to print something else. We're going to go like underscore times the length. And it looks a little bad at first because they all run together. You can't tell if that's like 8 underscores or 9 or whatever. But again, we'll do an ugly version at first and we'll talk about making a nice one later. So now let's get a little bit of organization. This word list is going to be outside the main loop, but then some other things are going to be setting up a little initialize and then every turn and then maybe a little summary at the end. So let's start to rearrange here. I'm going to keep this at the top, and then we got this constant. And then let's make a main function, because pretty soon there will be other functions, and we can keep them contained. Now, let's say I don't really want a whole lot of validation, but we're going to check if it's in the word, and so in Python, that would tell you yes if you say 1 character or several, so we want to limit it to 1 at least. So let's say, okay, guess equals input, guess a letter, and you know what, we'll keep it short. We'll keep it really minimal here. And then we'll say print guess, just as a very quick test to make sure we're on the right track. Okay, because I just noticed something. Hey, wait a minute, you're probably going to type lowercase, but they're all upper, so we should throw on an upper right there. That's a good example of why you should print things and test it, because if I had set up this with all lowers, then I'm going to have to go back later. It'd be annoying. So now let's say, while it's not valid, we'll ask again. And so we'll make a really quick valid function that says true if whatever and false if whatever. So we've actually done this before in class, but I'm recapping it for anybody who's starting from scratch. And it turns out you actually need something else, because we're going to tell them that it's got to be new. It's got to be one that they haven't already used. So let's make a used, call it used letters or something, that we will pass along to that function as well. Maybe it's a string, or maybe it's a list. I don't know. But we can already see that there's a little pattern emerging here. We've got, at the beginning of the game, we're going to initialize a few things, maybe the score, whatever. Then we're going to enter into a loop. It's not a loop yet, but this will be a loop where we start to do certain things every turn. And then maybe we'll have a little thing at the end after the game is over and we say, oh, here's what it was, or here's a little message. So let's say, okay, this is just going to be a quick Boolean. It's going to be len of guess is 1, and this is going to be long. So just like with the list, you can separate it multiple lines. Maybe put the and at the beginning. I don't know. And guess dot is alpha, because we want it to be a letter, not like a dot or a semicolon or whatever. And guess not in used letters. Okay, so this will return true if all of those criteria are met, in which case we're ready to go on to actually use it. But we don't want to use it if it's not good. We don't want to use it if they said 3 letters or a lowercase letter or a snort emoji or something else, okay? So let's say, what can we do with that? First, I'm going to print it. I know, but I like to test it. And Python doesn't have a lot of testing or validation or type checking built into this system here. So let's say, okay, I'm going to go with E. And then not only did it let me pass, but it changed it into an uppercase E. What if I go with the bad one? Okay, it asks me again. It says, hey, that wasn't good, right? You know what the most common bad input is nothing, is an empty string. Okay, now if we put a good one, do we escape back into the normal cycle? Yes. Maybe we could print a thing that says try again or something, but we really want to keep it simple. Maybe later we could have this return a little error message, or we could tell them the rules at the beginning, but again, who knows? So now, if it's in there, we can say if guess in solution, we do something else, we do something else. What are those things? Well, maybe this one's easier, so we'll do the easy one first. We'll keep score, and we'll count down 5 to 0 or 6 to 0, and when it hits 0, you're done. So should we call that score? Well, score is usually going up, so having it go down would be a little weird. Should we call it lives or HP or attempts? I'm going to go with attempts, but we'll see what we think. So it decreases by 1 if you didn't get it, so we're going to initialize that as well. And then what if it's in there? That's where we're going to have to reveal it. We're going to say, okay, the current state of the blanked out version that we show is going to get replaced with the slightly updated version. So that is going to have to be named. Okay, we could call it blanks, or you could call it like partial word, because it's going to be a mix of blanks and letters soon enough. So let's say blanks equals reveal. Maybe we'll make a function called reveal, and it needs to know the blanks. Or, well, here's the thing. How are we going to reveal it? One thing that we talked about in class is you could get the index. So you could say, I'm going to look through and say, oh, well, index 1 and 6 are E, so we're going to reveal those. And so that's what we did in class. But I feel like showing a different way, because I always try to show different angles on it. So for this one, I'm going to do it without an index. I'm going to do it where you just loop through and build up the word one at a time from scratch. Basically, have we ever guessed it? If so, we reveal it. not really caring if it was now or if it was 2 turns ago or something. So in that case, it's going to be solution and the used letters, okay? Which means we're going to keep track of that. So I'm going to say, okay, this doesn't work yet, but let's do it. And so what I'm saying here is instead of finding it and then using the index, we'll just build up a new one. We'll say like result, and then for char in solution, if char in used letters, meaning if we've ever guessed it, now or in the past, through this game, I don't mean like a week ago, then result plus equal char. So we'll say like, oh, you guessed E, so now E is part of the display version. Else result plus equal underscore. And this one doesn't use an index, which is kind of nice. I always like avoiding that if I can. So now the whole thing is 40 lines, and that's enough to get it going. That's enough to play it and see if we can start testing, I think. Let's give it a shot. Wait a minute, I forgot to put a loop. We need one more line to loop this turn system. This happens once at the beginning. This happens several times, right? So this stuff is going to be in a loop. And we have the choice of, could be a for loop, kind of, when we count down based on the attempts, but then we have to not count down when you get it, so probably not. A while loop gives you a few possibilities. While true, and then escape later, like we could say if attempts is 0, then break or whatever. Or you could put the conditions in here. You could say while attempts is greater than 0 and blanks does not equal solution, and just dump it all in this opening line. So we'll see what we think. But I'm just going to try it in this absolutely wrong minimal state because it's still enough to get us going. So let's say E. Wait a minute, we are not showing the state of the word, so we got to throw in one of those. So we'll say print blanks. Okay, now since it's so limited, the word bank is so tiny, I know what this is. This is Bulbasaur. But it keeps going because it doesn't know that the loop has an end, right? And it looks bad in several ways. We've got everything running together with no spaces in between. We've got the used letters and the attempts never shown to the user. So we should probably tell them that, right? So let's give them a little status every turn. And guess what? When we have something we want to do, and it's like a concept of a few things put together, I would prefer to put that in a function instead of saying like, hey, my main loop is about to be 30% longer by saying print this, print this, print this. I'm just going to put them all off to the side. Okay, so let's make a thing called status, and then it's got blanks and attempts. Maybe we'll do use letters first. Doesn't really matter, but just thinking to keep it consistent. So then I'm going to go print status of these guys. So this function is going to return a string. Is that the only way to do it? Of course not. There are lots of ways to do it, but I think this is going to be crisp so that our main loop is still small and it's just little things, and it's, if you ever want detail, you go, oh, how do we reveal it? Okay, there you go. How do we check if it's valid? How do we assemble the output, you know? So this is going to be multiple lines. This is going to be like, here's the blanks, here's the score, here's how many things you've guessed, and then maybe a blank line, right? And the way I'm going to do it is using something we learned recently. Actually, two things we learned recently. The join method and a list, okay? So I'm going to go like lines equals something, and then we'll join the lines. This is potentially one big expression that you could cram it all together, but I'm going to do it as a few separate things. And this guy right here is a new line character. The \n is like the equivalent of hitting enter. It's bringing us to some new space. So it'll put a new line in between. So this is going to say like, okay, blanks, and then let's give ourselves some room here, and then used letters, and then attempts left, attempts, oh, we're gonna have to go stir, you know. Now there's a way we can do it later with something called f strings, but we haven't covered that, so I'll do it the old-fashioned way here. Now let's try that, see what happens. We're gonna get this even before we make a guess, which is great because we don't have to do like a separate thing for an intro at the beginning unless we want to tell them the rules or whatever. And so let's say I'm trying to lose because I was curious if the attempts would go below, and that's what's happening. The attempts are going below 0, which is not correct. So, okay, let's think about it here. By the way, this is more than enough for the first draft. We need a first draft that's like a testable alpha build, and now we're going toward a beta, which is something that's meant to be a little bit better and something that people are going to have slightly higher standards for, while keeping it minimal. We're not going to make like a 1,000-line thing that has every feature you could ask for. We're just going to do enough. Okay, so for example, earlier I mentioned that this is only going to handle single word solutions with no space. Now is the point where you could say, oh, what if the answer was Star Wars? I don't want to have 9 blanks. I want to have 4 space 4, right? Maybe we'll come back to that in a second. But let's see what we had. I was going to talk about ending the game. So we could put the conditions here where it's like while blanks not equal solution and attempts greater than 0. Maybe you want to space it out. And that's fantastic because it does all the logic without adding a new line at all, except when it's over, we don't know why, right? When it's over, we have to check again, like, oh, is the attempts greater than 0? In that case, that means we won. So that's a little bit annoying, but it's fine. It's changeable. We can always go back to something else. Now, I'm going to say, what if we need to test that before we go on? I was going to say something else, but we need to test that because I think I know what I'm doing, but that's the time when you mess up, right? By the way, we need to see if double can work, because at first we tried to use the find method, like solution.find guess, and it would only find one A when there are 2 A's in this answer, you know? Okay, there's one where we won, but it just ended. It was anticlimactic. It should have said, hey, the answer is Charmander, bada bing, bada boom. What if we just print the status again at the end? Is that going to be what we need? Kind of, because that would tell you what the word was if you didn't get it, and it would at least make you feel better if you did. So put that real quick, and then we'll say to do summary message at end, you win, etc. Okay? But at least printing it is something, right? Oh yeah, I also wanted to space out the turns. Right now it's all squished together. Wait a minute. It's not what I wanted. I wanted to show the answer. What if I give it the answer instead? There you go. So the function doesn't know that it had to get the blanks. We can give it the solution. In fact, I'm going to make that more generic. I'm going to say word. And I'm also going to give it an empty line because I want to space them out. Beautiful. Now they're spaced out, except it looks weird at the top because there's a blank line. So let's add a little title in the top. Let's say intro. Welcome to Hangman. Guess letters until guess one letter at a time until either revealing the word or running out of chances or attempts, because that's the word we used in the thing. Okay, what do we think? Print intro. Maybe we could tell them the criteria for a good guess, like, oh, it has to be one that's not already used or whatever. Could put that in there. But hey, that's already too much. I'm not going to read 4 lines. I'm just going to say, let's do the dang game, right? Okay, so let's see if we can add one more feature. Now, in class, we talked about handling spaces. We talked about asking if they want to play again. We talked about all kinds of categories on your word bank, and you would tell them what the category was, or you would even let them pick. But I'm going to do a slightly different one this time because I was doing it in class and I thought it was fun, which is a health bar. So instead of just a number, and instead of the classic showing a man on the gallows, we're going to have like a little health bar that goes from 100% down to 0. So let's say everything remains the same. The benefit of setting it up this way is that your functions do a little job and don't step on each other's toes. So like if the reveal was different, nobody else would know. They would just continue on their merry way. So we're going to make a health bar that doesn't interfere with anybody else's. It's just going to have one point where it describes what it does and one point where it gets called, and that's it. Okay, so let's do it. Let's say health bar, and all it needs to know is the attempts, right? It doesn't need to know what the word was or whatever. And then I could just go like star. Well, star is weird because we're about to do multiplication. Let's say W, just as a test, times attempts plus underscore times 6 minus attempts. So this is like the part of the health bar that's good versus the part that's empty, right? We're going to replace this with something pretty in a minute, but I'm just getting it started. That would be right here. Hey, instead of the str, we're going to do this guy. Great. Okay, so every turn it's going to show us like the health bar decreasing if we, yeah, see how it's going down? Beautiful. Now let's make it actually beautiful. I think it would be cute to use colors that change, like the classic Resident Evil. Green is full health, and yellow's medium, and red is critical. Okay, so I was showing that in class, so it's got like if attempts is less than 3. We're going to go color equals. And if you're on Windows, you can hit Windows key semicolon to get a little emoji keyboard. I don't remember what it is on Chromebook, but we can look it up. It's going to be this little guy, and put it in quotes. Elif attempts is less than 5. Yellow, this guy. Else is normal, is like the green. That. So we'll do color. And then this will be like a neutral, like a gray. The grayish one looks kind of pink in some. Oh, here, there's the ones that are recently used. They call it white sometimes, I don't know. But let's try that. On the CodeHS console, especially mine where they have the text huge, where I've zoomed in for the video, they kind of overlap, so we could space them out, but see how the health bar is decreasing and then it turns yellow and then it turns red? That's beautiful. And then our status automatically prints the empty one at the end, which is a good way of showing that you have been unalived, right? So let's talk about what you might do for the rest. I'm going to end the video soon because it's getting long, but what are some things we might do? We might have a longer word bank with more complicated answers. Maybe they have spaces, dots, numbers, apostrophes. All you'd have to do is say, if it's a letter, if it's a thing that the user could guess, we make an underscore. If it's a thing that they couldn't, we just keep it. We just put the space in the solution or in the blanks. We just put the number in there, and then they'll see it and they'll get a sense of the shape of the answer. Another thing you could do is more than one word bank and have categories. And then that could be a choice, like, oh, this time we're going to ask you, do you want state capitals or, dinner foods? Or you could do 2 random choices, one to get the category and one to get the thing inside the category. Another thing is we could have a much better intro at the beginning, maybe show an example, maybe tell them the rules, whatever. Another thing is when we get to the end, we could have a much better message at the end. Another thing is when we're handling this input stuff, we could be a little bit more visually nice. Like, for example, right now this health bar is great, but it kind of draws your eye toward it and away from the important thing, which is the word. So maybe we could beef up the word, maybe we could put something around it or below it or change the way it's shown to give it more prominence. Another thing is I've talked about we could add an option to play again, or if you do what I said earlier, if you make longer answers with spaces and stuff, then you probably want to give your user a chance to solve it all at once. Like if it's Star Wars Episode 3 - Revenge of the Sith and they get half of them, they don't want to type enter, letter, enter, letter, enter. They want to go solve. So if you get long ones, then you'll get, in your testing, you'll realize, come on, I want to solve it. And then you can add an option to do that. So whatever you see in your testing will probably present ideas for improvement. Thanks for watching. Bye.